Well, my name is Robert Reed Truckenbrod, and I was born in Buffalo in 1921. I went to school 66 and Bennett High School in Buffalo, and then I studied. I specialized in art. That's the only thing I was good at. I was pretty poor in mathematics and stuff. I studied at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and then after 2 years there, I enlisted in the Navy and flew Avengers torpedo bombers from the USS Monterey, a light carrier with the fast carrier task forces. When I was at Pratt, we were in an art school, and what do you call it? Not the Commodore, the head man of the school was Boudreaux. He was a big flying buff, and he got us qualified as 2-year college students, even though we wrote nothing except for art history. It was all artists, but anyway, so many of my friends and I got into flight schools. I enlisted in New York City and went back to Buffalo. I enlisted in right after this, my second year, which was like the end of May in 1942, that would be. And that summer, the Navy sent us to Cornell, to a little airfield there, to fly Cubs with the Civil Air Patrol, because they didn't have enough or enough airplanes to take us directly into flight school. So we were there at Cornell, and that was quite interesting. We had no uniform. We wore white T-shirts and blue jeans and little sailor hats, and a captain from the Navy came through to see what we were doing, and he said, "Why are these men walking around in their underwear?" Which is a T-shirt. See? So what we did is we took off our little white sailor hats, and then we all looked like the rest of the Cornell students.
Right.
And anyway, I got there a day late, but after about 6 hours, you're supposed to have 8 hours before you solo. After about 6 hours, my instructor told me, he said, "Now make a sort of a short landing." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so I said, "Why am I making this?" And stop. He said, "Why am I making this?" And he said, "Because I'm getting out." And I said, "Well, what am I doing?" He said, "You're going up in solo." Woo, okay. So I did. From there, then we went down to pre-flight school in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where we did engineering. We studied school stuff all morning, and then physical education or physical stuff, games in the afternoon. And all the games, like in basketball, they allowed blocking. They were trying to get you to become more aggressive and not such nice guys anymore. So you could knock people over in basketball, and get away with it, or they wanted you to. And the only thing I was really good at is the obstacle course, because it appealed to my imagination. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of fun with that. So we went from Chapel Hill, North Carolina to Glenview, Illinois, and started flying what we called Yellow Perils. That's a biplane. One was a Stearman, the other was an N2S, which is a Navy version of the Stearman. And we flew that all winter out of Chicago in the cold. It's an open cockpit airplane. So we're flying around Minnesota in the middle of winter. And so when summer came, we graduated from there, and when summer came, we went to Corpus Christi, Texas for a nice hot summer in Corpus Christi, but I didn't much care about it. It didn't bother me because we just wore khakis, and we didn't care whether you sweat or not when we were kids. The difference in Well, when we got into the bi-wings, we did started doing acrobatics, loops, and and slow rolls and snap rolls and stuff like that, Illman turns, and we got that part of it too. So we learned to maneuver. Whereas the Cubs, they said, "Oh no, you can't do any of that stuff in Cubs. You'll tear the wings off," which I found out was not quite true. After the war, I did a few loops with her, with this girl in the back seat of a Cub. But at any rate, then we went from Corpus Christi to training in Opelika, Florida. They call that advanced training, and we were supposed to fly the type of aircraft that we were going to fly, but they didn't have any. And I was supposed to be a torpedo pilot, but they didn't have any Grumman Avengers there, so I flew the old clunky torpedo plane that Ensign Gay got, and his whole squadron got shot down in, and I flew Brewster Buffaloes and bi-wing or biplane Curtiss Hawks, and there was one of those fighter planes where you had to crank up the wheels with a hand crank and a bicycle chain thing, cranked up the wheels. So we flew all those old clunkers, and then finally I got sent to San Diego, and they sent me up to Crow's Landing, California, and I joined my squadron, BT-28. There I flew. I got into the Avengers and flew those. And there at Crow's Landing, California was sort of right behind the row of hills behind Monterey Bay. So we dropped a few torpedoes in Monterey Bay and started doing that, although we did more glide bombing and torpedo dropping, but I did drop a few there. Oh, let's see, somewhere, this was after the war. All right. So we went, then the squadron was shipped to Hawaii, and we were in practically every island. The last one I remember was Barking Sands up in Maui. I know, that was in Kauai. And we had a prop of a Japanese Zero there that was taken from the island of, I think it was called Lanai, where no white guys were allowed. They were all just Hawaiians, except for the big five who owned the whole Hawaiian Islands almost, Dole and those people. And we had, well, let's see. And we went down to Maui, and we went to the island of Hawaii, and of course we were at Kaneohe Bay on Oahu, and that was sort of a really neat place. And when we were in graduated from the regular flight school in Corpus Christi, you got your choice of being a Marine or a Navy pilot, and I said, well, I'm going to be a Navy pilot because I like their uniforms better, and besides, they get to carry a sword. And I said, what do you do with a sword? Said, you pull it out and you swipe at the Jap Zeros going over. Well, I never saw a sword, but my uniform did have a little sword slot in it. Yeah. So that's what happened. Well, it was interesting because we got pretty good, it was quite exotic. And one time let's see, what was it? I don't know, we got to know, I learned how to surfboard and stuff like that. And that was fun too. And we went to a few nice parties, and one of my pals got married to a girl there, and I got to dance the hula with, now I can't even remember her name, but she was one of the big daughters of one of the big five people there, but she wasn't wearing a hula skirt, and she wore a sleek little black evening dress, but we were doing the hula, and I was doing the hula because I was a pretty good dancer. Anyway, that was fun and interesting. But that was after the war, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When Tom Dreiss got married? Yeah.
Yes, I think.
Anyway, or not after, but on our second tour. So then we flew aboard the USS Monterey, which was a light carrier, and we joined the fast carrier task forces. So in all we had 16 carriers, and groups of 2 big ones and 2 light ones like mine, 4 groups like that, so that's 16 in all. And we headed out for the Marianas. Well, my first aircraft landing was actually in Lake Michigan when I was at Glenview. Or after I completed my advanced training, we went up and I did it in an SNJ, which is the Brits call a Harvard trainer, or I think the Army called me AT-6. But it was on a converted lake cruiser, lake boat with a flight deck. So that was my very first carrier landing, was right up in Lake Michigan. Then
Were you scared?
No,
Little
you're too dumb to be scared. So we went. So then, when we were in Crow's Landing, California, in Crow's Landing, for one thing, we stayed in a little dumb little barracks, very rustic or very meager living, and then we were shipped to Watsonville, which was right over in Monterey Bay, and there somehow or other, all these millionaires or rich people had beach cottages, and they let us use the beach cottage. So we went from barracks to luxury houses there. But then that's before we went over to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii we got out to went aboard ship the Monterey, and we headed for the Marianas, and that was our first combat. Actually, we had before I got in, made my first combat raid. As we approached, our fighter planes went up and participated in what was called the Marianas Turkey Shoot. And one of my best pals in the fighter squadron shot down 5 Zeros that day, in one day, and became an instant ace. And, so that was, and we were supposed to maintain radio silence, but there was none of that. It was like a football game, Hey, there's one in your tail. Oh, go at him. Hey, wait a minute, I got this one. Now wait a minute, I'm circling. I'm on his tail, and we're sitting back in the ready room, cheering and yelling like it's a baseball game. Well, the next day they sent us in to let's see, Tinian was my first combat, and we were loaded with bombs. We were supposed to bomb the runways so that the Japs couldn't use them. Well, the Grumman Avenger, which was a TBM or TBF, was TBF when Grumman made it, and then they turned it over to General Motors and called it TBM. It's the same airplane. And there were 3 people aboard, me, the pilot, and a ball turret gunner who was sort of facing aft most of the time, and a radio man who sort of operated the radio, but I made all the radio transmissions and he had a little tail gun that he could shoot too, but he never did. And my gunner was a guy named Malazewski, and he was I think he was 36 years old, and we called him the Ancient Mariner because he was so old. We were all around 21 or so, and the skipper of the squadron was 26, and my gunner Ski, we called him, was the Ancient Mariner, and my radio man was Swantek. He was much younger guy, but and he used to what we did an awful lot of time was fly anti-sub patrol out in front of our fleet. And so, I didn't have 50 missions or 50 strike missions like so many of these my Army friends did, but the ones I did have were quite interesting. And so we were first coming into Tinian, and I had seen our Army artillery, anti-aircraft artillery out San Francisco shooting off anti-aircraft things and seeing the puffs of smoke way down the way. And when we started in, those puffs of smoke were right in front of me. And I said, oh my God, somebody could get hurt up here. Anyway, they didn't have radar like the Germans did, a radar aiming. So you'd see a puff of smoke in front of you, just move off to the right a little bit, and then they'd move over this way and you'd go back this way. Well, anyway, we went in, and some people had a few hits, but I got hit, but I never got scratched on any of that stuff. And so we drop on the runway or on a gun emplacement or something, and it's you're on a land and they'd say you'd get back and your aircraft intelligence officer would quiz you and you'd say, well, did you get a hit? And you say, geez, I don't know. All I saw was a big bunch of dust and dirt fly up. I assume I got one. So some of my pals who were on some of the big carriers, when I saw them on leave at one of the islands, they were covered with medals, air medals and stuff. And I said, how'd you get all those air medals? He said, well, because we were on the same strikes that you were on. I said, well, what did you tell them? And they said, I said, I tell them that I just saw a big puff of dirt come up and smoke, and I don't know. Well, you dummy. You say, oh, I blasted the shit out of it. and then you get a medal. Anyway, that's how you get your medals. You tell them you really got hits. But, who knows? Well, I'm sure we got hits because the targets were easy targets. Our usual load was 400 or 500 pound bombs, and that was the most consistent load that we had. And one torpedo weighed 2,100 pounds, and 400 or 500 pound bombs weighed 2,000 pounds. So anyway, let's see what else. Well, then we came back to get, after about a month or so, let's see, before this happened, or shortly after we started, they saw the Japanese fleet was coming out to pulverize us or do something. So at 7 in the morning, I was the skipper's wingman, one of them, and the four of us went up, and we were out going in the general direction we thought the Japanese fleet was going to be in. We were loaded with four armor-piercing 500-pound bombs. So about 11 o'clock, they still hadn't spotted the Japanese fleet, and we were about out of gas by that time, so we came back and landed aboard. And so about 2 o'clock, they did spot the Japanese fleet. And so I said, well, let's go. So I started getting into my flight gear, and my skipper, the air group commander, or the squadron commander, was named Ripper Gift. And Ripper was getting into his gear, and I started getting into mine. And he said, Truckee, you can't go. You flew all morning. You're too tired. I said, yeah, but Ripper, you flew all morning too. How come you can go? And he said, because I'm the skipper. Now, can you imagine wanting to go and face a whole enemy fleet, everybody shooting at you? Anyway, we did. So my skipper and my three roommates went on this trip, and they sank a carrier and got the Navy Cross for it. And I've got some pictures here of it.
What battle was that? Philippine Sea?
The first battle of the Philippine Sea. Well, on this same battle where my three roommates went, everybody landed aboard, including a couple people from. They all came home at night in the dark, and the admiral, who were supposed to go along in pitch black, he turned on all the lights because everybody was coming home at night in the dark,
Of gas.
and very low on gas, and my three of our people landed, and a couple other guys from other carriers landed aboard, but my one roommate missed, and we thought he was gone, and so we felt very sad about that, and so our custom was you'd sell off his stuff and send the money home to each other, and send the money home to his wife or his mother. Well, so we were all feeling very bad because this guy was named Bob Burnett, and he was a great guy, and he was a big basketball player at Stanford University, and he was big pals with who was the president who was aboard? Gerald Ford was aboard our ship and so he was big with him because they would organize all these basketball games on the hangar deck, and I got pictures of that too. So about 3 days later, we hear now hear this: stand by to take destroyer alongside to transfer personnel. And as we get the glass out, and there's Bob Burnett. He had been picked up, and so we all rushed. He was the only guy who wore actual pajamas. Everybody else wore those skivvy shirts to bed. He had a college raincoat with him. He's the only guy who brought his whites. So I went and put his pajamas on. Somebody else put his whites on. Somebody else put his college thing on, and our band played the Stanford alma mater as he's coming aboard in the breeches boy. And I'm saying, "Go back, go back! We've already sold your stuff, so you can't come here." Anyway, like 3 days, but they didn't call us to tell us that he was alive and had been picked up, and so we thought he was dead, and we were all grieving a lot, So anyway, that was that one, and then later on, we had no power assists on their controls like they do on airplanes now, and so I finally found out how to hit things, and you just had to overpower it, because the more you're diving, the faster you go, the tougher it is to hold it in there, and the tendency is to pull up, and then you can miss. So I figured you just have to overpower it, and it goes where you're supposed to go. So we got over Manila Bay later on that year, and this would have been 44, I guess. And I was along with my one roommate and the skipper, this Ripper Gift, and we had already dropped on floating dry docks and stuff in Manila Bay and Manila Harbor. And we went out into Manila Bay, and there's some little ship which they later described as a inter-island oiler. And my skipper and my one roommate both dropped. We had three bombs because we were going a long way, so we had an extra wing tank instead of a fourth bomb. So they dropped in train the way they're supposed to, and they went boom, 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 and missed, both of them, And I somehow messed up and only fixed it to drop one bomb. I don't think I was meant to do that, but I did it by mistake or something. Right down the middle. Well, that little boat sank in about 15 minutes. So then we headed north to Subic Bay, and we're going to rendezvous, and the overall strike leader called my skipper and said, "Anybody in your place, your flight got any bombs left?" And he said, "Yeah, I got one guy with 2 bombs." I said, "Well, hit that destroyer there. It's been damaged, but it's still operating, or go for that." And I went down and I got 2 hits on that. Boom, boom. and put that out of commission. So they said, ooh, 3 bombs, 3 hits, 2 ships. Pretty good. So they gave me a Distinguished Flying Cross for that one. About 800 feet or 600 feet. You start out you go in at 1,200 feet. And then as you're approaching a target, you go down. Oh, in this Manila Bay, we were pretty much lower all the time. But normally you're going in and you pick up speed from 12,000 down to about 6,000. And then your last thing, and you drop it about 1,500 feet or so. Because you want to pick up as much speed as you can get and still control the airplane. Well, we went up the bone ends and past Iwo Jima and Chichijima and all that, and then over to Formosa, which was Okinawa, over to Okinawa, and the capital is Naha, and we're just supposed to drop on the hangar there, and we did. That was sort of smoking, a lot of people, and so I dropped my bombs on that, and our chief gunner's mate always complained because I had 2 fixed 50s that I could fire forward, and he said, "You never fire your goddamn 50s, Truckee, or Mr. Truckee. Why don't you do that?" And I said, "Oh Christ, I'm thinking of something else when I'm dropping bombs." So as we're flying away from this, and you're sort of jinking so that they can't hit you. Well, here's all this stuff out in all these little boats, fishing boats, and they said, well, anything that floats is an enemy, so you should shoot it up. I'm like, I guess I'll try my 50s. And I saw this one little boat down there, and there had traces in it, so you can see. Brr, it's like, going like this, brr, and then and I'm getting down to like 300 feet, and I pull it right over there, and I can see a man standing there driving. It's the first time I ever thought that I was killing anybody, And Jesus, jump, will you jump? And I don't know whether he jumped or not. I think he probably ended up dead. But I hated the idea that I was going to shoot some guy, an actual human being. Oh boy. Anyway, that's one of the few times I got pictures of Gunnar Bennett too, and some stories about him. He was pretty funny. Well, this same Gunnar Bennett was a big comedian, and he'd say, he was a chief petty officer, so they could come out on the foredeck. That was like officer country we'd go out there and sunbathe or just go out and have a cigarette out there. And he was out there and said, "Hey, Mr. Truckee." Oh, he had a little bit of a lisp. And he said, "Mr. Truckee, you taking old number 9 tomorrow?" I said, Yep. And he said, "Oh, good. I got that loaded with boopies." And I know it's a joke coming in. "Yeah, Chief, what are boopies?" 10 pounds of fit in a 5-pound bag. Oh, yeah, sure. So anyway, I sort of suspected something funny was coming. And let's see, then. Oh, well then, the most horrendous thing there, by this time we're getting to be, we got loaded up we went into Kaneohe Bay to get loaded up with rockets, and adapted for rockets. And I landed, and there was an officer directing us in, and guiding us in. And I said, I got out of the thing, and I didn't look at really his face at all. And I got out of the thing, and I started to light up a cigarette. I was standing down there, and this same officer says, "I thought all you zoomies smoked cigars." I looked up, and it's one of my boyhood pals, Russell Sloan from Buffalo. And anyway, that was his. But we never did fire rockets. All the fighter planes got to fire the rockets. And I took this Russell Sloan up. He was the officer in charge of fitting the planes out. I took him up on a practice run, and I was getting really good shots with his bullseyes. And he says, "Hey, you're pretty good." I said, "Well, you put those on there so nice that I have to shoot them good." Anyway, that was my boyhood friend. And I think about, well, we did lots of other duties. Oh, the one thing she was telling about is one of our duties when we weren't raiding, we call them strikes when we were going hitting the enemy. We'd do anti-sub patrol, and it was so boring. And you're just out in front, and you'd try to look under every cloud. And one or two times I saw a whale, but never a submarine. And so you got, let's see, first you put on your first you have to put on your pistol, which is a shoulder holster, 38 police special. And then your life, or your Mae West, then something else that was uncomfortable, and then your shoulder harness and seatbelt, and it was, and I got so tired of this, and this gun is sticking into my ribs and everything, and I was just going along like that, and I'm going to shoot this thing. So I pulled the canopy back, and I shot out the side, bam! And all of a sudden I hear my gunner, you can feel it. Where are they? He thought I had fired one of my 50s and it jammed, and we were being attacked. I said, "Don't worry, Ski, it was just me shooting my 38. And he said, "Oh, okay."
That would
Well,
be the only way.
They told us, some of the instructors, one was a hand-to-hand instructor, Ed Don George, the old wrestler from Buffalo, and Jack Dempsey was down they were both at the pre-flight school in North Carolina. Well, they've all said, "Now we're going to teach you this, jujitsu, but if you got a choice, run." Yeah. And then toward the end of this tour of duty, then in early December, Admiral Halsey was taking us up north, looking for the Japanese fleet again, or one branch of it, and we get into a typhoon, which was the scariest thing of the whole trip, because we had no smoke. Some of our airplanes broke loose, and smoke went down the ventilators into the engine room. We lost about 3 engineers. They got killed, and we were dead in the water, and we had no gas masks or anything. So they sent us up on deck. So we're sitting on this deck going like this, and hanging on like this with they had little tie-down strips, and we spent 3 days like that, and that was the scariest thing I've ever seen. And the air group commander and his executive officer were up there too, and his name was Roger Maley, and he just died recently as an admiral. He stayed in, but some sailor slipped and flipped over the side of the ship. But we're dead in the water, but we're still like going like this, Well, these two guys, well, that's the end of that fella. They waited till the boat was like this and almost ready to come up, and then they let go and they slid down just as the boat came up, and then they hung on and they went down and grabbed this guy and pulled him out of the water. Yeah, the flight deck was right over into the water. Oh, it's really scary. And my the captain of our ship kept saying, we gotta get this thing moving. I have to get back in formation. And his executive officer, or the navigator, sort of took over, because this guy panicked. And he said, "Don't move this damn boat until I tell you, because we're not going to do anything with it until we're ready." And at any rate, he took over for the captain, who then later went down to Annapolis and became the head of Annapolis. But they put him ashore anyway. And that was the same. the same typhoon that the Caine Mutiny was written about. You know that are you familiar with that? Well, it was a book and a movie. Humphrey Bogart was in the movie. He was the captain of a destroyer that was the same that his crew mutinied because he wanted to get back in formation too. And so that was based on an actual event. And three destroyers capsized and lost everybody in that thing because they had, they pumped when the oil gets low, they fill the tanks with water to keep it ballast. Well, they had pumped all the water out because they thought they were going to refuel at sea, and that's when the hurricane or the typhoon struck. So they had no ballast, and they lost 3 destroyers, and almost lost the Caine, but except for the mutiny.
Here you are.
Monterey, USS Monterey. I think carriers are named after various battles of some sort. Well, no, wait a minute. Well, the Hornet and Wasp weren't, but I think all the light ones, like George Bush was on, I think the Cabot or one, that was the same kind I was on. He was there at the same time, doing the same thing, flying the same airplane off a different light carrier. George Bush Sr. Oh, they were very maneuverable. So then we were damaged so that we came home to Seattle. We limped home to Seattle. And on the way home, I played gin rummy with my commander, or the squadron commander, this Ripper Gift. And, he figured, he's a dumb artist. He can't add 2 and 2. And how come he's beating me all the time? And we would make these big bets, $1,000 and all that, on paper, write it down on paper. So I still am in touch with him, and I said, don't forget, Rip, you still owe me $4 million. I'm not, and I expect that money any day now. So, because I won all that from him. But we came home and had 30 days leave, and let's see. Then reformed the squadron and went down to Boca Chica, which is right next to Key West, and did some more torpedo work, practicing. And then they shipped their squadron out to Hawaii again. Oh, then I got married. And in May of '45, and they shipped the squadron out. We went out to Oahu, and they broke up our squadron and sent us to another squadron where we were going to be replacement pilots and everything. So I worked there, and it was monstrous, and we called it, when we have a big operation, we call it a group grope, because nobody knew what they were doing, and by this time they were letting high school kids in, and they were a bunch of wild men, crazy kids. So anyway, that's when one of my friends got married, and up in Oahu, when I did the hula with this Dole girl, or whatever her name was. And also I borrowed a fighter, because towards the end of that, let's see, it must have been, it was when the kamikazes were coming around. Yeah, it must have been the end of my first tour before the tidal wave, or what do I call it, the typhoon. That's when the kamikazes started. So they sent us to a little airstrip on Ulithi Lagoon to check out in the F-6Fs, the fighters. And I'd always wanted to be a fighter pilot and fly the fighters, but I thought, I don't know, they land about 30 miles an hour faster than my TBF does. I'm not sure after 2 or 3 hours, a couple of landings on this little island, that I want to go and land this on a carrier. Oh boy. Oh, it was nice, very nice. Except that when my roommate got married, we were down in Hilo. I was down in Hilo, he was up on Oahu, and so I borrowed a plane, which they let me take a fighter, and flew it up there, landed in Barber's Point, went to the wedding and stayed overnight, and next morning I was going home, and I had quite a bit of champagne. I was a little bit hungover, and I get in this plane. You have trim tabs, which you change for when you're revving up a lot or not. So I had it for landing, and when I was taking off, I went down the runway. Oh, Jesus! I said, "Oh, I hope nobody's looking." But then I figured it out after I got there. Oh well, when we were down there in Hilo, Hawaii, and all of a sudden they started issuing winter flight gear. And I know what this means, because this was summertime, and I know what this means. We're going to Japan. I wasn't too anxious to do that, because I know that if you ever made a crash landing there, every civilian would be after you, and as well as their soldiers. So anyway, and all of a sudden the war's over, and I had so many points that I got home by September of '45. They let me out, so I went back to art school and completed my year in art school. And what I thought was it's tough courses and all that just seemed easy then, because I'm just that 4 years more mature or 3 years more mature. Everything worked out pretty easily. I thought it was a big airplane. It didn't seem small to me because it was bigger than the fighters. It was the biggest, the biggest carrier plane, except for the ones that who flew the B-25s in for that raid in Japan early in the war, just as a token, and lost almost all the airplanes. But it was a good handling airplane, and very stable. Sure. When you're 21, anything's easy to climb into, or 22. Well, we landed we went ashore on Marcus Island for a recreational rest period, and I saw this little guy in, he had on khakis, but he had on a marine fatigue hat like cover, but with this Navy admiral's scrambled egg peak on the thing. I said, "Who's that little guy?" It's Jock McCain, and it's John McCain's grandfather. Yeah, he was one of the admirals in our fleet. When the Monterey was damaged, we went into Seattle, and we took a real choo-choo train home. It was had a smokestack and all that. It wasn't a diesel, and it was a long trip across the country. We didn't fly across. We went on a train, and I was walking down the aisle with my Navy uniform on. Of course, it was almost all soldiers and sailors and that. And all of a sudden, this admiral said, "Ah, Lieutenant! Thank God I found a Navy man. Sit down here with me on my cribbage board." I said, "Admiral, I'm sorry, I don't know how to play cribbage." And he said, "What?" I thought he was going to cashier me right out of the Navy because I was deserted because I didn't know how to play cribbage.
Me too.
Well, no, that was San Francisco when we were making practice carrier landings off of San Francisco, and it's very rough out there, and we cracked up about 4 planes. Just damaged them, so they're damaged and on the deck, and we're going back into San Francisco Bay, and they're always painting that bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, and these guys they assume we're in combat. They say, "Nice going, fellas! Yeah, you guys are heroes." We just broke up these airplanes, not on purpose. It's just the way it went. We call them I forget what we call it. But the tracer bullets, you can see them, they're like lit baseball things coming up towards you. No, I never got hit, and I thought, what am I being saved for? Because a lot of my friends did get hit. And we took one of the fighter intelligence officers up in, not in my plane, but one of the other Avenger pilots. He sat in the gunner's thing, and he went to shoot the gun, and it's supposed to be a safety switch when it comes by his tail, but he shot his tail, his own tail, and he's the intelligence officer of the fighter squadron. We just had two squadrons. We had fighters and torpedo planes on our ship. We used to have dive bombers originally, but they were the SBCs, or no, TBDs, and their wings didn't fold, so we couldn't use them on our ship was too little for that. We had to have folding wings. Oh yeah. I got a, well, I'll show you some pictures of it. Now, you're just interested in the war, because I've got a lot of other things. Like, I wrote this out so that, as a practice obituary, so that she doesn't write Robert Truckenbrod, war veteran, you know. I want to be known not as a war veteran in my obituary, but as an artist designer. And well, after the war, I returned to Pratt Institute and graduated, and went to work for Harper's Bazaar magazine. That was quite interesting, because I was riding up in the elevator with supermodels, and they looked pretty plain until they got into the makeup thing and do that. I was with not on the editorial staff, but on the sales promotion department. And so then I worked for another small agency in New York for a little while, and then I came back to Buffalo, my hometown, and got a job as junior art director with Batten, Barton, Durston, and Osborne. I won quite a few awards for my designs for their many clients. Besides graphics, I designed and built the sets for the Buffalo Philharmonic's presentation of Deflator Mouse. I did the interior design for Nick Pittio's bar in the Ellicott Square. I designed cosmetics for North Squip Skis, a local cross-country ski company. I began skiing more. I skied a little bit before the war, but I got serious about it and functioned as general contractor for the Ellicottville Ski Club. They're building in Holiday Valley. I designed several first prize-winning floats for the ski club's entries in the spring carnival. I designed 4 houses for myself with innovative features like solar orientation and floor and ceiling radiant panel heating. Well, then I taught art at Bryant Stratton Business College, a business institute, during the 70s. I started sailing in a homemade kayak during the 1930s, raced as a crew in several classes at the Buffalo Canoe Club and Buffalo Yacht Club, and with my wife Roseanne helped sail a 50-foot catch from a friend's catch from Tampa Bay to St. Lucia in the Caribbean, and later back to Buffalo. So that's about my life.